Welcome to today's Explainer. We usually dive deep into some pretty dense data, but today, we're taking a completely different approach. We are going to deeply deconstruct a profoundly simple 8-word piece of source material. Just 8 words. But to really grasp the immense weight and practical application of this text, I want to frame it through a rather unique perspective. For a moment, I want you to look at this through the lens of a 30-year career in actuarial science and risk management. Now, in that world, my entire professional life was literally built on counting days. Actuaries measure life expectancies, we calculate risk over time, we tally up the cold, hard probabilities of human duration. We're literally trained to look at a life as a series of chronological units on a mortality table. But the text we're analyzing today, it deeply challenges that purely mathematical viewpoint.
Okay, let's dive into this. Don't count the days, make the days count. Just let those words sink in for a moment. Absorb it. It's just 8 words, but they act as a perfect mirror. Think about it. In risk management, we try to mitigate loss over a timeline, effectively trying to hoard days to maximize a lifespan. But this text suggests an entirely different way of managing the ultimate risk of our own mortality. It's a brilliant shift in perspective. It challenges the very nature of how we perceive time and value, and we're going to break down exactly how it achieves this structurally.
Let's isolate just that first clause for a second. Don't count the days. Notice the feeling that evokes. I want you to really read that slowly. When you're just counting days, you're existing in a state of passive waiting. You're crossing off calendar squares until the weekend, until a vacation, until retirement, or if we're looking at it from an actuarial standpoint, until the inevitable end of the timeline. It is an exhausting, repetitive, and ultimately completely powerless position to be in. You become a mere spectator to your own time, just letting the chronological progression of numbers dictate your existence. You're essentially just a statistic waiting to happen.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how we can break down the specific semantic meaning of the action happening in that first half of the quote. The word count here, it's being used as a purely mathematical verb, to list or tally in chronological order to merely measure duration. Think about a metronome, just tick, tick, ticking away. Measuring duration doesn't inject any actual quality into that duration. In a traditional risk model, well, duration is everything. A 90-year life is mathematically more than a 50-year life. But this text is actively warning us against the trap of quantitative living. Tallying up days as a passive action is a fundamental misunderstanding of what actually makes a human life valuable.
Structurally, look at how this builds. I want to focus entirely on the semicolon here. Seriously, this tiny little piece of punctuation is the absolute unsung hero of our source material today. It is the physical and philosophical pivot point of the entire text. A semicolon connects 2 independent but deeply related clauses. It serves as a bridge, separating the passive trap of duration we just discussed from the active pursuit of meaning we're about to see. It's the breath you take when you realize you've been living on autopilot right before you grab the steering wheel. It forces the reader to pause, let the trap of counting sink in, and then physically transition their mindset for what comes next. Which brings us to the resolution. Make the days count. Listen to the sheer shift in energy there. We've moved from the restrictive, passive don'ts to the incredibly active, empowering make. You are no longer the observer of time, you are the architect of it. The directive of the source text isn't about ignoring the passage of time. It's about completely revolutionizing your relationship with it. You're stepping off the actuarial spreadsheet. You aren't managing the risk of a short life anymore. You are actively managing the risk of an empty life. So the crucial point is how this text executes a brilliant semantic flip. We're looking at the exact same word, count, but the definition has completely transformed. It now means to have true value, meaning, or significance, to matter. It is no longer a quantitative measure of time passing, it is a qualitative measure of purpose. A day doesn't count just because the sun came up and went down, right? It counts because of what you decided to inject into it. The significance isn't inherent in those 24 hours. It is forged entirely by your actions within them. And this brilliantly illustrates the philosophical journey we're on. On one side, we have count the days, that passive tallying, the domain of the actuary, the slow march of chronological time. On the other side, we have make the days count, the active living, the intentional creation of meaning, the absolute domain of human vitality. It pits the 2 halves against each other perfectly. The text uses repetition and inversion to show us that the very thing we are so obsessed with measuring, our time, is entirely useless unless it is filled with value. It's the ultimate paradigm shift from passive endurance to active creation. Which leaves us with the ultimate takeaway from today's explainer. Ask yourself, are you counting the days or making them count? Think about your own daily routines for a second. Are you just letting the math of your lifespan happen to you, passively ticking off boxes on a calendar, or are you actively shaping the value of your present moment? Don't let your life just be a series of chronological tallies. Go out and inject real, undeniable meaning into this very day. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll leave you to meditate on that thought.